Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and I'm here today to share with you how I masked off my images to do a bit of watercoloring around them. So the first thing I did was I cut out a piece of watercolor cardstock with this crazy stitched frame die from Craft and Desert Divas. I just ran that through my Big Shot with some watercolor paper. I'll be using this Congrats stamp set from Altenew. And you can build little air dancers with this stamp set. It's so cute. I'm going to use my Misty because I'm stamping on watercolor paper. So I just laid out three little bodies, I guess you could say, and I'm going to stamp these down onto this die cut panel with some waterproof ink. I'll go ahead and stamp these a couple of times. I'm stamping on watercolor paper, the textured side of it, so it does take a few stampings to get the ink nice and dark. Now once I get those stamped down, I'm going to move on and stamp the arms. Again, I'm using my Misty for this. I looked straight over the stamps so I knew they were lined up correctly, and I didn't want to do any masking, so I placed these arms to where they're not going to run into each other. Again, I'm stamping them in the same ink, and I did a double stamping with those as well. Now for this last little pair of arms, I'm using the same ones I used on the middle guy. I just flipped them over so they're facing down. Now I stamp bases on each one of the little dancers. Again, I did double stamping, which is why I'm using my Misty. And now I'm going to stamp different mouths on each of them. This stamp set has different mouths you can stamp on each one of them, so I chose 3 different ones. And on this little guy, I'll stamp a little tongue sticking out, and this one has a wide smile. Then I will stamp the eyes on each of these. Now these eyes will eventually be covered up, but I do want those little eyebrows, so I'm just going to go ahead and stamp them anyway. And it also has little toppers and also things for their hands you could stamp. I chose not to. Now to mask, I'm going to be using liquid Frisket. This is a white masking fluid, and I'll be using just an old cheap kids paintbrush. This is just from I have a big glass full of paintbrushes that I let my kids use. This is an old one, it's falling apart. But I'm just going to stick it in this liquid Frisket, and I'm going to mix it really well first. You don't want to shake it. If you get any air bubbles in it, then you're going to have spots on your images that don't get masked completely. So I'll wipe that off with just a baby wipe, and then I'm going to dip my paintbrush in it. You don't need a whole lot, and then I'll go ahead and start painting this over my images. Now I didn't notice any shrinking whenever this dried down. I went right up to the lines of my stamped images, maybe a little bit over, but I didn't notice any shrinking. I won't lie, this stuff stinks. I mean, it doesn't smell good. I expected kind of a chemically smell, but this stunk. So just keep that in mind whenever you use it. You might want to work quickly because the smell is not pleasant. It doesn't last long, but it's not the most pleasant smell to fill up your craft room. So I'm on my last little guy here. I did each of their bodies fully, and I also did their little bases. I know they're black, but sometimes watercolor can build up over black parts of your images, and it gives them kind of an off look. They get that color a little bit. So I'm going to be doing a blue wash behind each of my images. I let this dry overnight completely. It doesn't take that long, but I went on and worked on a few other things and just let this completely dry, but it does take a bit of time. So keep that in mind. So I am just going to do a completely blue wash over this background. And I did a wet on wet technique. I just wet my cardstock with a large brush, and now I'm going in with some wet watercolor. Now this little guy helps remove the masking fluid once it's on your paper. This is an adhesive eraser from Xyron, and it just pulls up that masking fluid and it doesn't leave any residue behind. It's only a few dollars. I would suggest it. I think it works really well. It does its job really well, and it doesn't. I was scared the blue buildup on the masking fluid was going to transfer to my white images. With this, it doesn't. So for that, it's worth it for me to spend the few extra dollars to buy it. Now, if you mess up on your masking fluid the first time, you do not want to try to remove it until it was dry. When I first got the masking fluid and I was playing around with it and messing around with it, I was working pretty quickly. I didn't wait completely for it to dry, and I ripped my watercolor paper. It wasn't a big deal. I was just, playing in my craft room, but I kept that in mind whenever I went on to do this card, that if your watercolor is still wet or if your masking fluid is still wet, it can rip that cardstock, so just be careful. There you can see I have 3 balloon dancers or air dancers that were completely masked off and are completely white. So I was very happy that I didn't have to go around each individual one with my wash of color. So I'm just going to watercolor in these little images. I'm not really worrying about the eyes too much. Again, I'll cover those up. And I am using this Sakura Koi sketch box. I got the larger set of it, and it works really well. I like them. I know some people said that they didn't have a chalky consistency to them. However, I noticed when I really built up the color on some of these, it did give me a little bit of chalk, but nothing horrible. So to cover up their little eyes, this is going to be a children's card, so I'm adding teeny tiny little googly eyes, and I am using some liquid adhesive just to put those right on top of the eyes, and I'm using my quick sticks tool just to make it a little bit easier on myself. I tried to use my tweezers and they just kept flying out of them, so I got this guy out and it worked perfectly. Now I am using the multimedia mat to adhere these down, but you could use any liquid adhesive that you feel comfortable with using. So to attach this to a card base, I first went ahead and put some fun foam on the back. I've got double-sided adhesive on that, and then I'll pop that onto an A2 top folding card base. I also went ahead and stamped and heat embossed in clear on top of that, and it says, "I just can't contain myself, ... and then I'll finish the sentiment on the inside of the card. But that is included in the stamp set. So for the inside of the card, I did use a black A2 side folding card base, so I need a white panel on the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp on that right now. I've got it loaded into my MISTI. It measures 4 inches by 5¼ inches, excuse me. So I'm just going to finish that off, stamp "Hooray, Let's Celebrate" on the inside, and 3 more of the little dancer guys hanging off the bottom edge of the panel, and then I'll just put some double-sided adhesive on the back of that and put that right inside the card, and that finishes it off for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope I gave you a few useful tips on masking your images when you watercolor. As always, I will leave you guys with this close-up and just a few pictures of the finished card. For more information and the supply list, you can head to my blog. That link is in the description box below, as well as the major products I used on this card. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!